The Alberta Independence train is on the move, and it's got the Liberals here in Canada losing their minds. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody, it's PJ. We've got breaking news for you today, straight from the Alberta Prosperity Project, which is the organization leading the effort for Alberta to become independent from Canada. They just came back from Washington, D.C., where they reportedly met with senior members of the Trump administration who reiterated their support for an independent Alberta. They also talked about an economic partnership where there is zero tariffs on both sides of the border. Meanwhile, President Trump is talking about making Canada the 51st state in a recent speech. We'll be covering this and other important topics you won't want to miss. But before we start, do me a favor and double check if you're still subscribed. If you are, please click the bell icon so you never miss an update on the Alberta independence movement. Let's get into the video. So this right here is a tweet put out by Jeffrey Rath, who is the legal counsel and co-founder of the Alberta Prosperity Project, and it reads, "Breaking, Washington, D.C. Mitch Sylvester, Dennis Modry, and Jeffrey Rath met with very senior representatives of the U.S. administration on Monday in Washington, D.C. Recognition of Alberta as an independent country and completely free trade with the USA with zero tariffs on all goods and services are all on the table when Albertans vote to leave Canada." It's interesting that we have more support for hashtag Alberta independence from the United States than we have from an Alberta premier with a supermajority of our party members supporting Alberta independence. He's referring to obviously Premier Danielle Smith, who has been kind of playing the middle in all of this, kind of sometimes supporting independence by making the referendum vote more attainable by lowering the amount of signatures required and increasing the amount of time to collect said signatures, but also sometimes saying things like, well, I'm going to do everything I can to avoid independence actually happening, which a lot of people on her voter base, don't see with a favorable view. And then he posted a picture here saying independence protects their future. You have a child, for those of you listening and maybe not watching, a child holding an Alberta flag over the prairies, overlooking the beautiful Rocky Mountains and the oil pumps of Alberta, very characteristic of our beautiful province. Then you have the article from the Western Standard, which is an Alberta newspaper, which reads, "Alberta independence on the table in talks with U.S. officials." Jeffrey Rath, Mitch Sylvester, and Dr. Dennis Modry of the Alberta Prosperity Project were in Washington, D.C. on Monday to discuss Albertan independence with cabinet-level U.S. officials. So this was at the cabinet level, not just staffers. This was the second round of talks the APP has had with members of the Trump administration after a first meeting took place back in April. Yeah, they met with U.S. officials reportedly back in spring earlier this year. And quote, "We wanted to talk further about things that Albertans would be interested in knowing from a due diligence perspective with regard to independence," Rath, the APP's legal counsel, told the Western Standard. According to Rath, this week's meeting marked a significant step forward. Quote, We had a very productive meeting at a very senior level with the Trump administration. One of the people that was in our meeting left to go directly to the Oval Office," end quote. He said, stating that the level of the meeting is an indication of the strong support from the United States for Alberta independence. He declined to disclose which officials attended, saying that both parties had agreed to confidentiality. You know, some people will criticize that and they'll say that, well, why wouldn't you reveal the name? It's because this is all early stages. That's my opinion on this entire thing. This is early stages, right? The United States is obviously the most powerful country on earth. And if President Trump decided, you know what, I'm going to reveal what we've been talking about with them and who's been talking and all that, he could. But due to the fact that this is early stages and Alberta is still a part of Canada, it would be unlikely for them to show their cards this early. To say, oh, Secretary Rubio, Marco Rubio, is the one who's been meeting with the Alberta Prosperity Project, right? Like, it would create controversy that isn't necessary at this time. We need to have a referendum vote. Once that happens, or once that gets closer, I presume personally, this is PJ here speaking, I presume more international attention is going to be given to this topic. There's already plenty of international attention when it comes to what's happening in Alberta and the possible balkanization of Canada, which, in my opinion, is completely inevitable. Canada will not exist as it is today in the next 5 to 10 years. 10 years is a stretch. I think 5 years is it's going to be the time that it takes for Canada to turn into Yugoslavia 2.0. So that's why I believe they haven't disclosed who exactly it is that they're talking to or meeting with. It's just too early. It's early stages still. Anyways, back to the article. Rath said the discussions touched on what Alberta would seek from the United States if independence were achieved. Quote, we're very interested in U.S. recognition of Alberta as an independent nation state immediately upon the result of a successful referendum. That is exactly what I was just talking about. This is when recognition talks are going to be public, is upon a successful referendum and in the lead up to said referendum. Once there's a date, once votes are starting to be collected, this is when international attention is going to be mainstream. Because for the first time ever, Western Canadian province, because we've all heard about Quebec wanting to separate from Canada. They've done that multiple times in the 90s and prior to that in the 80s. But a Western Canadian province has never actually taken it that further, and Alberta is at the doorstep of that. Back to the article. He added that free trade was central to the meeting, saying the principles of reciprocity in the context of a future Alberta-US trade agreement and the possibility of establishing a common market between the United States and Alberta, which would see zero tariffs on all goods and services on both sides of the border, was openly discussed. Quote, they were very interested in the process and where we were in terms of moving things forward, Rath said of his American counterparts. So this is huge. This is yet another meeting that the Alberta Prosperity Project has had with high-level senior officials in the Trump administration. And here we have President Trump, I believe it was yesterday, where he again reiterated his interest in Canada becoming the 51st state. And let's take a listen.
Countries with it. We don't have it ourselves. And Canada called me a couple of weeks ago. They want to be part of it. To which I said, well, why don't you just join our country? You become 51, become the 51st state, and you get it for free. So I don't know if that made a big impact, but it does make a lot of sense. It actually makes, because they're having a hard time up there.
He's referring to the Golden Dome. Reportedly, Mark Carney said that Canada wants to be a part of the U.S. missile defense system called the Golden Dome. And Donald Trump has told them repeatedly, just become the 51st state and it's going to be completely free. For those of you who do not know this fact, the Canadian-U.S. relationship when it comes to defense is incredibly one-sided, meaning the United States has to basically provide defense for Canada. Anyone who faces reality knows that if it wasn't because the United States provides basic protection to Canada, there would be Chinese warships in our north right now. Way up in the territories, there'd be Chinese warships or Russian warships right now. They don't do it because they know that if they do that, not only is Canada a part of NATO, but it's also a part of NORAD. It's America's closest ally, although that's changing very rapidly. They know that from a U.S. national security perspective, being that Alaska is literally right next to Canada's north, and the U.S. has a very strong interest in the north, hence the interest in Greenland as well, the US would be defending the North on behalf of Canada immediately, but also for its own interest. And that's what's been for many years. Canada previously used to, somewhat punch above its weight in the sense that they did contribute, even though they never contributed monetarily a ton. There were many brave soldiers who did important work. But nowadays, you don't even have that. There are some soldiers out there, but they're being neglected by the federal government. They're being mistreated, and morale is low in the Canadian Armed Forces. And then investment has also been neglected over the years, and Trump knows that. And then you have this article from Global News. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith government says it is planning to introduce legislation that would allow it to ignore international agreements signed by Ottawa. This is something that I talked about on this channel previously. Basically, this is another indicator that the province of Alberta is moving forward with getting as much distance between Canada and Alberta as possible. The province is basically saying, look, you can sign all the treaties, all the agreements, all the accords you want internationally. We will not be a part of them. We are not going to be a part of anything you sign with the United Nations, with the World Economic Forum, with the World Health Organization, and any of those multinational globalist organizations. If that doesn't indicate that Alberta is wanting to represent itself as a country, I don't know what does. I've already read the article previously, but here's a little snapshot of it. Alberta legislating authority to ignore international agreements signed by Canada. That is very important wording there. Ignoring international agreements signed by Canada, ignoring the federal government's commitments internationally. I don't know what else indicates that, look, we're looking to just do our own thing. Leave us alone. And that's where the article goes. Then there's the reality of Alberta leaving every other province in Canada behind. There's a chart here, as you guys can see. This is posted by Rise of Alberta. Shout out to them. That shows net provincial migration of young workers. Young workers are flocking to Alberta, particularly after the Liberals won the last election, because they know that the only place in Canada that has any hope at this point, I mean, you can throw Saskatchewan in there as well. They have some common sense in that province, but they know that the number one province economically and that has any future and that has any semblance of Western principles and Western prosperity and hard work is Alberta. And look at this chart right here. You can see at the very bottom is Ontario, and it makes sense. If you live in Alberta, you'll see Ontario plates everywhere. Ontario plates and BC, British Columbia plates. It's like you guys south of the border, say you're in Utah or you're in Idaho and you see California plates all over, or you're in Florida and you see New York plates all over the place. That's the reality here in Alberta. We see Ontario plates, British Columbia plates all the time. I've even seen Quebec plates. Quebec is really far from it. It's like a 2-day drive, and they're all over the place out here. So Ontario lost the most workers. This is workers. This is people that are between 25 and 44 years old as of 2024. Manitoba was the second one losing the most. Saskatchewan, surprisingly, because Saskatchewan is doing overall okay. It's like after Alberta, Saskatchewan's right there. They lost a bunch of workers, probably to Alberta due to its proximity, right? We have the lowest taxes in Canada too. There's no sales tax here, so that's also a factor. Quebec, unsurprisingly, lost a bunch of people. British Columbia, then you have all the Maritimes, the little provinces, and then you have New Brunswick, which gained a little bit of people. Mostly insignificant, but they did gain. They didn't lose people. These are all way out on the East Coast, just north of Maine and Vermont and such. So it makes sense. I mean, Albertans are just trying to protect their legacy, the legacy of the people who founded this land, which were hardworking cowboys, homesteaders, oil men, farmers. These were the people who worked the land, worked with their hands. It's just a completely different culture. And I say it often on this channel. Canada is going to end up the way of Yugoslavia. Canada is already more dead than Yugoslavia was. And the thing that really breaks countries apart is when you no longer have things in common. When there's just the divisions are irreconcilable. You just can't. It's like it's completely different people. You go to Ontario and they're completely different. It's just completely different mentalities. There's very little in common. In hockey, it just won't cut it anymore. Here's a video that talks about exactly what I was just saying here from Keith Wilson.
And the other point I would make is, you need a level of homogeneity. You need a level of commonness. You need a level of shared vision, a shared understanding, a shared mission to have a nation. And we have that in Alberta. We have that from Wainwright to Pincher Creek, from Grand Prairie to Medicine Hat. Hardworking, get knocked over, dust yourself off, and get back at it, right? Just like the homesteaders and everybody else. That's part of our culture. That's not the culture of Central Canada. I've spent a lot of time there, and the focus there is about what the government's going to do for them and how the government's going to solve their problems. Albertans are interested in why governments are in their way and how are they going to get out of their way so they can get shit done. So we simply don't have the homogeneity to have a viable country, in my view. You need some commonality, and as time goes on, it's becoming increasingly apparent that we don't have it.
And I'm going to leave you guys with a little bit of humor here. This is from Alberta Memes. Shout out to them on Twitter, Alberta Memes or Alberta Memes. I love this one. I got a chuckle out of me here. Chuckle. You got Hummer here saying, "We don't want to leave Canada." And then you got Lenny saying, "What did he say? I don't know. Something about swallowing Tylenol." He drives away, just fist pump, like, hey. Yeah. So that's where we're at here in Alberta. Independence train is moving. It's moving. I say to people all the time in my comment section, which, by the way, if you have a comment, I try to read as many of them as I can. I try to reply to as many of them as I can. Shout out to all the channel members who support this channel, by the way. Thank you guys so much. Couldn't do this without your support, but leave a comment below in the comment section. I tell people all the time that there's a lot happening behind the scenes. There's a lot of work being done by the grassroots. There's a lot of volunteers, hundreds and hundreds of volunteers doing work tirelessly to make this happen. Canada is unsustainable as a country, and this is not just me saying it. Their own guy in charge of the budget, the parliamentary budget officer, said this country is unsustainable. We're at the precipice. Literally, we're about to fall, and it'll be irreversible damage. And Alberta can either go down with the sinking ship, or it can save itself. And Alberta is worth saving. This is pretty much the best part of Canada right now is the prairies, Alberta and Saskatchewan. There's also the territories up north, beautiful country up there. But politically speaking, Alberta is leading the way to save whatever remains of Canada. And it'll probably be a new, better, improved, actually free republic of Western Canada, or whatever they want to call it. It's been PJ. Peace. Hey, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to be notified every time a new video is published, hit the subscribe button and activate the notifications bell. It's completely free and it helps our channel grow. A heartfelt thank you to all our channel members. I really appreciate your support. See you all in the next one. Peace.